Let's do Astralis as the last one, because I think Astralis is a fun one, because obviously nobody had these expectations that they would be this good immediately. I mean, I'm pointing this out to people on other shows, but I feel like it goes missed. When we talk about that insane flaw of FaZe, where they make all these finals, right? Guys, they've now won 2 LAN series against FaZe in their first 2 events. Like, teams don't do that unless they're like Vitality, by the way. Like, that just doesn't happen. So already, that combined with like some of the numbers, yeah, it is incredibly exciting. But this is where I think we can have a fun discussion on this, because obviously right now, the stock's just going up, right? But if you're an analyst, there are still some holes you can poke. Like, the first one is an obvious one to me, which is, mate... Right, I said on a past episode, the reason I was skeptical Device should be the IGL is because you won't be able to do Device numbers and be the IGL. Now look, so far he's doing it. And you know what? Actually, he's the one player I'll maybe give credit. If anyone was going to redefine Counter-Strike, I think he already did it as an AWPer, by the way, in CS2. Maybe he can do it as an IGL. Maybe he can be like a better version of KD and be a good IGL and frag, but even better fragger, right? The difference is the whole team is so over-fragging right now that like... Guys, they really will have to be the best team in the world if they're this good. Like, that seems like it cannot hold to me. Like, some of those players, that's honeymoon shit right there. You know, the honeymoon period, like, it exists. And when you go and look, here's another angle that I think people are really missing, is because they've, like, played 1.5 events, they haven't even played enough series yet, Maniac, to play 6 maps. So at the moment, right, they perma Anubis, but they've never played Mirage. Well, immediately, here's an analyst angle, and spoiler, I'll definitely be using this for betting. I'm just going to go and look up when I see them in future tournaments, teams that will punish pick Mirage into them, because, man, that's immediately where I'm going to see them tested a bit more. Like, yeah, they've rinsed it on the whole map pool at the moment. It's okay, but they've only played 5 maps. Anytime you've only played 5 maps. It's why... Carrigan did do that genius veto against fucking Spirit on Vertigo, because we all knew that was one of the only maps that they keep in that they don't like. Now, I will say, the joke there is, his veto still wouldn't have worked if Spirit hadn't stupidly then called the bluff, which is like, to use a poker analogy, you called a bluff when you didn't have a great hand either. Like, why, you didn't actually know you had the winning hand there, guys. You should have just said, well played, Carrigan, but now we just default into, I think it was like H or something, whatever it was. You would have just defaulted that, you would have won the series. So already, I get a little bit nervous, because we're already making it like they're going to win all these series forevermore. So there are some factors I expect to normalize and come down a bit. But I'll tell you what, I want some of your thoughts on the problems, but we can also in a minute wax lyrical. There are some fucking really cool aspects about this team that I was like, I wanted to be a hater and be like, the Astralis Orgs fucked it up. What did they do with Blame F? He was guaranteed frags. Device, you probably ruined your career. Who the fuck is bro? I was ready for all these angles, but mate, if you're actually good, I've got to give it up. There's actually a lot of very positive. I'm actually a fan of this team now. I actually like watching them play. So what do you think about some of the holes I'm trying to poke in? Do you have any questions about Astralis?
Oh, okay. So you want me to attack the negatives or the doubts, the zones of doubts? I can do that definitely. I think number 1 on the list is Device's performance in the games where like +1% or -1% make a whole difference and you win or lose. And I think as a leader, it is sometimes some things that can be exponential, and like a small little crack is going to become a gigantic problem in a grand final, a semi-final, a map number 3. And I feel like the map was, I'm trying to find it, that Inferno against FaZe, which is the game in Chengdu that they lose 2-1.
The bug one, yes.
Yeah, that in itself, I mean, obviously the bug is a tragedy that it happens to Device, but I feel like it blindsided people to the fact that Device was already having a pretty quiet game. And I don't want this to happen, but I think it is the proof of concept that one of the trade-offs that they're going to have is that in moments where the stakes are the highest and the decisions are the hardest to make and people are a bit more tense, it's less loose, the players aren't having as much liberty and freedom and fun, then it's the IGL who picks up the slack. It's the IGL that's got to do that. When people are getting a little bit more tense and less ideas are flowing on TeamSpeak, the IGL has to be doing that. And unfortunately, I think that it might be a problem. And for now, it's just an idea that I'm going to have to verify with numbers and games in the future. But I have a feeling that we're going to start seeing a pattern where Device's performance gets the most impacted the higher up you go in the tournament, and the more intense and close the game becomes. Because this is where the IGL, this is where sometimes we praise Kerrigan so much for maybe not having the craziest stats, but then suddenly we all remember some of the calls he made at fucking 22-23 in CSGO, and it was like overtime number 4, and he still comes out with an incredible call. I think this is where his performance, that is device, will pay the price eventually. Now, that hasn't happened quite yet. Just that series against FaZe. Other than that, he's been bashing everybody, and I'm so happy, and it's great to see. But that is one area where I do wonder. And then the other one, on the Stone-Yabi conversation, I strongly suspected that Stone would be immediately better with the departure of BlameF. I strongly suspected that.
It's the most obvious role overlap, right?
Exactly. And he would then get to probably also have more space, not just the roles that he's having, but probably have more space and say in what's happening, because of course BlameF is going to take space. That is very logical, it's very obvious. But Stone was going to benefit immensely from suddenly this sort of oxygen that he's getting, the roles that he want to have. So that his performance now in Astralis is great to see. It was relatively predictable for me. What I didn't see is the Yabi immediate phoenix rising from the ashes, one of the most disappointing player in the Astralis jersey when he joined, and now suddenly he's shooting headshots everywhere. Like he's got 1 point, I think on LAN, ever since this roster came together, I had the page open, he's got 1.25 rating, and that's on 14 maps. That's 14 maps. Yeah. That's not just like 3 games. Like on 14 maps.
And by the way, they're playing like FaZe in about half of those games.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah, sure.
So that, like, he showed so much fragility when he was in the BlameF system that I started worrying. I thought, is he going to break? Like, is this like a breaking point for Yabi with all the hype and the expectations we had on him? And now suddenly he's just fucking destroying. So this is still an area where I'm being cautious, maybe overly cautious, and I'm thinking, okay, is that something that's gonna long last? Is that something that's gonna be consistent? Can I rely on Yabi being that good? Because I personally fully buy into the Stair being a good player. I've never doubted. I've always
he's been good even in the last lineup, yeah.
Exactly. The eye test, for me, the eye test was clear. Very much like Magisk in the sense of, yeah, maybe he's not going to have like a 4K that ends up on every highlight videos. But if you actually pay attention to what he's doing, he's very usually or very often doing more than what he is supposed to in any given situation. He's getting 2 instead of 1. He's getting 1 instead of 0. That's, to me, like the mark of an extremely good player who, by the way, changed positions so many times in the system, and he's still strong. So I believe in Stair. I believe in Storm. I believe in Device up until the point where maybe he gets really stressed as a leader. Bro, honestly, I thought was a clever signing because in Monte, he was doing pretty great and nobody was giving him any good role. Like he had nothing. He was given nothing to play with. He was kicking rocks in like the shittiest positions there is in Counter-Strike, and he was still good. And he keeps on delivering. But yeah, Device and Yabi. Like these are like Device in late playoff situations and Yabi overall. These are my 2 question marks that I wonder if, or rather what the future looks like for that.
Here's the area where fans use interviews in a way that I think stupid. They use interviews like it's a court testimony and the guy has to tell the truth. And so whatever someone says in an interview, you probably get this all the time. Like we'll make like a speculation of some read, or maybe we even heard behind the scenes something. But then because in the interview, the coach of the IGL just like maybe lies or suggests something otherwise. Fans are like, no, you are wrong. In an interview, he said that's not what's that. Like the famous example, by the way, is Taz going, it was my veto at the major. I've heard from behind the scenes, it wasn't his. He just did that to tank the aggro. So a fan's going to think I'm like, you're lying, and say I'm not. I just happen to know things that he won't say, right? But the one area as an analyst you can use interviews is it's really interesting as a peek into the psychology of in-game leaders and coaches. And so just like I said that thing about Device earlier that gave me sort of an idea about Zonic, Device himself early on made a comment in an interview, which I think is very telling for why Stown is way better. Because as you said, cos BlameF was the in-game leader in the previous team. Remember guys, Device wasn't. We're not just changing a 1-for-1 here. Device now becomes the IGL, right? Device immediately in an interview said that something like that they wanted Stown to be like more of a voice and a secondary caller, right? Now that is very interesting because if you're a player who's a BlameF-esque player, you're in that sort of a lurk spot, right? You know this, the lurker in an ideal world often is the secondary caller because he's on a different part of the map, he's playing on different timings. By the way, he also needs to coordinate what he's going to do with the lurk, with when the entry pack goes in, for example, or what the AWP's doing. Like, if the reason why back in the day, if people don't know, I always thought the Happy style was a bit inappropriate and based on too much fragging when he went to his extreme, is because Now you've got the IGL away from everyone, and instead of a secondary call, you're making the primary call, right? I think Stown's problem before is Blameff was the IGL, had a bunch of his roles, and so Stown not only didn't have his spots, but he didn't have agency. Like, he couldn't call anything for himself. Now he actually has a way of basically sort of updating the rest of his team, and Device, crucially, on what he's doing. And so I think already you see it's way better. Now, look, we're not at that point yet, so we won't worry. But obviously the one angle you worry about, like Chengdu, is put him on a stage, have all the lights in his face, and then say, it's down, time to be that top 20 player. That's where he historically has had his problems. But that's by the by, because right now in group stages, he is cooking, and they are cooking. The Yabi one's also very interesting, mate, because when he first joined Heroic, people are forgetting, like, the order of the narratives. He didn't join Heroic as a big-name player. Remember, everyone kept saying, that's just a side grid to refresh. That's what we all said, because he wasn't some, like, superstar in Copenhagen Flames, guys. He was, like, an all right player. But suddenly he just leveled up immediately in Heroic. By the way, a tactical team with a system, they fit him in, give him some edges. And if you remember, the things he was mega at is now what he's mega at in Astralis. He was really good on T-side as like an entry player, could break a site open because he has that crispy, like, insta-headshot aim. And then famously, what made him dope was winning all those clutches. He's doing literally both things right now, guys. This is why I have to give mad props to Device. And you know what? I'll just shade it in X, to be fair. I did it was Sonic earlier. Rogger's joined as well. Rogger's not some fucking nobody off the street, guys. He's been in loads of teams. He just often worked with lesser talents. So if you look, Device and Rogger have done a great job because they got their two biggest signings, Stown and Yabi, that everyone was laughing at. Cut them after you spent like $2 million. And they've instantly got them back to everything you'd want from them. And Yabi, if you go look up the stats, one, he is winning clutches for fun against FaZe all day long. That's what you needed. That was the dynamic element he brought to Heroic that made them a championship team. And then just go to the classic one every analyst loves. Go to this lineup, go to opening kills, T-side. Here's the stat. So they played 14 maps. He attempts 25.4 opening attempts and wins 52.9% of them. Good. Right? That is immediate. Now you can see, by the way, that combined with Device is why their T-side is fucking bonkers right now. And they are for real slapping like good teams. Now, the obvious question is, let's see them in the playoffs. But like I said, mate, this isn't just like people just popping off. Like, there is a system here. Like, I have to say, I've got it. I didn't know if Device could make the transition from like smartest star player to like IGL. Look, it's early days, but it's looking fucking promising. I never had this on my docket. I was sort of ready to tell him, bro, you already had your lane. You were the best sniper and all. Why are you doing this? So I agree with you. You can't expect him to post the numbers he has now. I mean, maybe at all, but definitely not in like finals of big lands. That's just not plausible. But there's a reason to enjoy watching this team. I find this team fun to watch again. I can put all that narrative baggage away and just enjoy what they do in the server. It's a fucking good teammates. In fact, it's a very good team. See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.